The New York Browning Society has been doing a poetry contest here in the New York City area for over 30 years. I don't think that there's anything quite similar in regards to high school participation or a high school poetry competition such as ours. And over the years, under my leadership, we've expanded to over 120. I think we have 126 high schools that we invite every year to come. So we get to see the best of the 5 boroughs. That's public, that's parochial, that's private, and each year we have, I guess it just depends on the crop of kids or the teachers involved. We've had some great teachers that have retired. We've had some new teachers. Part of my job is to try to find the right teacher within each high school that would actually be able to inspire and get people involved into the contest. And over the years, I'd have to say that I've had several teachers from a lot of prestigious schools come up to me and say, thank you so much for this, because without this, we wouldn't be able to even teach poetry in our curriculum. So it's a unique opportunity to not only get poetry back into high school curriculums, which is sad that it's not necessarily, but the fact that it's Browning, it's a win-win. So without further ado, we had a fantastic competition this year. We have 6 winners of the competition. 2 of the winners were not able to make it this year, unfortunately, because of AP testing. It's a thing we have to battle with every year. You got to get those college credits. I understand. You know, you're on your way to bigger things. But the 4 that we have 4 that did make it with us, and we also release a short list of 4 other schools each year. And 2 of those students are able to join us. And we will be inviting them to read their poems to fill out that 6. So without further ado, let's bring up our first winner. All the way from the Mary Louise Academy, let's bring up Bridget Farrell. She's receiving a certificate of award, a check for $100. Don't spend it all in one place. And you have your poem? Perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give our attention to Bridget.
This isn't nerve-wracking.
Don't worry, we got your back.
Okay. So this was actually inspired by Robert Browning's poem, Love Among the Ruins. As the winds of recollection caress my hair, they whisper tales of yore. The dark waves of memory pull back to high tide, then crash upon the shore. I hear in their echoes tales of lovers past, stories of you and me. A once mighty kingdom that crumbled long ago now lacks a queen and king. The bard left, and the only music that remains is found in the bird's song. The art and handiwork of are now gone. Love's labors have been lost. But despite the sadness that Minosier brings, you've cleaned my looking glass. Where gilded words and golden tongue once deceived me, hope shoots from the green grass. I was blinded by your handsome charm and sweet smile. It won't happen again. The fires of passion have long been extinguished. Nothing but smoke remains. The garden in which you planted seeds of deceit now are only green plains. Beyond the misty gray of your indifference, my lover proudly stands. I know a betrayal like the one you gave me could halt potential love. Still, fight in the waters that drowned is a single white dove. Scorched by despair, his black feathers block the moonlight. A beam of light breaks through. Heaven's rays shine forth to illuminate the truth. Stars dance on the old walls. A crown of celestial lights adorns his head as we stroll through the halls. With my hand in yours, we coronate each other. A new kingdom is here. On the crest of a hill where a palace once stood, near abandoned by all, beautiful melodies of human heart's nature did not abide by law. My kingdom, like a phoenix, has risen once more. Of this there is no doubt. Kingdoms will rise, empires will fall, but 'tis love we cannot do without.
Bridget Farrell, ladies and gentlemen. Gets a little teary-eyed there, huh? All right, so our next winner comes all the way from the Fordham Preparatory School. Let's give it up for Gearoid Kennedy. Award-winning certificate, check for $100. Do what you will. Do you need the poem? You have it? Gearoid.
Hi, everyone. So this poem is loosely based off real events. It's called An Irish Morning. Walking through the muck in my dark green wellies, sinking into the ground, trying to avoid the mounds of manure. I look to my left, Kahan with his whip, whistling tunes of old. I join him that morning as the sun hides, but the cows have to be milked. As we approach, they look massive, blocks on legs. One strays from the crowd as we nick and whistle, trying to keep them together. Kahan walks behind and gives it a whip, and then a slap. A massive thud rings out as Kahan lies on the floor. I run home in a mad haze and leave him on the ground, gasping for air.
Gearoid Kennedy, ladies and gentlemen. Our next winner is coming all the way from the High School of American Studies at Lehman College. Let's give a warm round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for Katey Sexton. Award-winning certificate, $100. Oh, I do.
This poem is called Gray Rainbows. I wish I was a rainbow, full of color even after a storm. Sadly, I'm more like a sunset. I'm mesmerizing, distracting even, but I am temporary. No one thinks about me once I am replaced by millions of stars. I force myself into cracks I don't belong in, like scarlet blood spreading out on the sidewalk, just to ensure I can't be removed painlessly. I'm a black hole hidden in pastel pink clouds. I let people bend me until I break, hoping they can make me into something useful. No one can get close enough to fix me. They just get lost in the dizzying darkness until they find a way out of my mind. I miss standing on solid ground and being able to hug people and waking up feeling awake. He stole more than you know. My perspective. I used to see the world in color, but now it's gray. Nothing sparkles in the same way. I only see the darkness in people since he stole my colors. Even a tear-stained hug from my mother doesn't bring them back to me because even bloodstains fade if it rains enough, and even the sun will burn out eventually. I will find my colors one day, perhaps when my muted gray world finally stops shrinking and goes away.
Katey Sexton. Should have Kleenex at the table, right? All right, ladies and gentlemen, our fourth winner that we'll be presenting here today. Let's give a warm round of applause for Divya Mehrish out of the Spence School. All right, she's a little taller, you don't have to move the mic so much. Here we are. So Divya, award-winning certificate, $100.
So I first want to thank Mr. Keppel and the Browning Society for this opportunity and for having me here today. This poem is called Full. It's from the perspective of a daughter, not me. I've taken advantage of my creative license. Full. I have this memory of us in the ocean, my thick thighs rolling between the waves, a polka dot of sweet moonshine sticking to my glinting nose. Mommy must have forgotten to spread it. She used to laugh then, bouncing me on her knee. She would squeeze the air out of the space between my round stomach and my rib cage and float me until she taught me that drowning is a choice. Age was sweet to her then, before I knew about glass, about bottles dancing on bathroom floors, about the music behind closed doors. Those were the days when I slept with hot eyes, when night was yellow and wet, when twilight creaked by as slow as the swing on the porch, when rivulets of crimson began meandering down the rotting mirror. Time had already stretched my calves, my fingers, my fear. Time had already stretched her tears, stretched the darkness in her hair to soft gray light, stretched her laughter into a long, low wail, whispering behind my curtains, scratching at my door. If I thought hard enough, it sounded like a hum. The morning the air smelled like cold marsh sweat. I saw orange in the sky, saw the pink gumdrops in orange plastic cylinders popping, a firework of twist, whoop, roll, tumble, pop, repeat, drowning in color. I saw the glass in her eyes before I saw the shard between her fingers, etching a smiling jack-o'-lantern onto her forearm, peach pus glistening through those jagged teeth. That was the last time I spoke to her. Then, my lips the cold glass, cutting into the glorious stillness of her steely-eyed silence. When I sleep now, I'm hungry. My stomach is flat against my pelvis. I am empty of mother. I crave salt, the ocean, soft, clean skin. I plead into the hum of the thrashing waves to feel her fingers on my stomach again. I scrunch my eyes and feel through the darkness, get the kitchen knife, and trace a circle around the scar I made in her. I peel back the flap of flesh, shiver as a blast of warm, throaty air seeps into my skin. I climb back into her stomach and nestle into the dark, tangled space between her ribs. I cradle her heart in my arms and rock her thudding lullaby to sleep. And as I feel my roots plant into the depths of the darkness, I kiss her tears and I cry.
Wow. All right, so we had two, let's see here. We had two other winners that couldn't make the event. Let's see here. Would you guys like to hear their poem? Do you want me to read the winning poems that could not make it? Yes. Okay. I wasn't prepared to do this, but I'm always prepared. All right. So another winner that we had was also from the High School of American Studies at Lehman College, Jillian Louie. And her poem was "In Which a Beekeeper's Daughter Teaches Me How to Be Brave." What can you say to the beekeeper's daughter that she hasn't already screamed? Her knees painted with the gray of bruised fruit, stockings run down from the edge of the kitchen table, a face like dried flowers your mother keeps from Easter. Reborn, anew, torn down, a girl of steady courses and dipped horizons, much too young to die, far too old to tie her hair into pigtails and become unforgettable again. So I'm in love, she cries into clouds of wings. There comes no response, friendly only in their wispy bodies and whispered hum, a universe, bitten lips and ruined nails, a bitterness that comes with being normal. She tells me that there are some things that don't feel like anything else. What can you say to the beekeeper's daughter that she hasn't already screamed? That was "In Which a Beekeeper's Daughter Teaches Me How to Be Brave" by Jillian Louie. Let's give her a round of applause. Of course, she's got her award and check in the mail. I didn't realize I was a little teary-eyed after all this stuff. It's probably because I'm so familiar with all these poems. The next winner was Rhea Gibson from the Wadleigh Secondary School for the Performing and Visual Arts. This is an interesting poem. It's entitled Abandon. How am I supposed to feel when you walked out that door and told my mother that you were coming back? Those empty promises you made, and we believed you, believed in you, saw the best in you as no one else did. I wish she had found someone worthy of her, deserving of her. I placed you on the highest pedestal because you are my father, yet I barely even knew you while you were alive. I can't count the times, thoughts of you placed tears in my eyes, wanting to be held by you, the sound of your heartbeat, the bass of your voice, the prickliness of your beard on my face. I can still feel it if I close my eyes and imagine hard enough. I wish that you didn't walk out that door that night, only to be shot and killed. It's not your fault, but sometimes it feels like it is. I'm alone and I'm scared. I'm abandoned. You left me to fend for myself like an animal in the wild, abandoned. You left her alone to protect us by any means, abandoned. You left us searching for you and the men that enter our lives, abandoned. You're not here. I'm abandoned. That's Rhea Gibson, ladies and gentlemen, from the Wadleigh Secondary School for Performing and Visual Arts. All right, so we had a fantastic short list, and we have two of these winners here with us today. So we'd like to invite them up to read their poems. We have, first of all, we have Carly Kahan. Could you like to join us on the stage? This is our poem, Where Mountains Meet Sky. There you are.
Where mountain meets sky, the snow falls softly on the gray sidewalk. Earth's frozen feathers float down in the graces of the wind. Each car has its due amount of the frosty white cover, just enough to draw my name on top. The step between street and sidewalk is sloped with the fine winter flutters. Cold air tickles my nose. I feel the crisp frost brush over me. Earth in winter, bustling through, brings in a new feeling to the city. But there is a scent, one that also lands upon the towering mountains. The gray skies above shuffle in images of the past. I am walking in a blizzard that is not unfamiliar. Similar in that, my hands retreat up the sleeve of my coat. I shiver inside the many layers I already have on. Here, I have no mask to cover my face. Here, I only see the darkness of this raging tempest. Through the blurry gray and fluttering flurries, I make my way through this storm. I remember a place so far away, this place where mountain and sky meet halfway. To me, it is heaven between earth and sky, the brisk air tingling my nose. I could feel my heart beating as I steadied my breath. Sky high, my brother walking by my side. I like Main Street, strolling down the snowy sidewalk. I see the soft lights that line the stores. Crisp air fills my lung and puffs out white exhales. It is quiet here in this quaint moment of everlasting winter. When the snowflakes fall, bringing all my worries down with it, I see the smile on my brother's face. The light in our eyes shines through the valley. It is as if we are drawn here by the winds, safe in the storm-deep mountain ranges. These streets feel farther away than what I remember, my heart still racing into the memories of this faraway land with the same flurries, the same crisp wind, the same smell that lightens the air. Where the mountains meet the sky seems so far away. But within, I feel the sense that they prosper among me. My heart is lifted when I remember the mountain's colors, the snow falling. These streets here, where I stand, are not the same. I am unsure why these places feel so different. I feel this uncertainty and take it, hoping it gives me a sign. Though both here and there look the same in a crowded blizzard, here I don't see the light in your eyes. Only here we can know one thing. The snow is only here to melt, but the snow remains frozen where the mountains meet the sky.
Carly Kahan, ladies and gentlemen. So, last year, I don't know if you guys remember, we had 3 winners from Xavier High School, so we can't do it every time, but if I wanted to give out an honorary Browning Society winner, it would definitely be to Declan Coles, and he's going to be reading a poem inspired by multiple poems by Robert Browning. Do you mind explaining? Yeah, sure. Let's give a warm round of applause for Declan Coles, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Good morning. So my poem, Wild Withered Blur, is actually broken up into 10 different stanzas whose structure emulates a different Robert Browning poem, with all one complete narrative. Okay. Wild Withered Blur. I remember that day. I saw her, perfect in every way, heart's wild blur. Mustered up with shaking hands to her. Deep breaths, I said. Be cool, I said. Old school Jim Nair shined as with her. Racing heart filled my ears as I speak. Her smile left my knees weak. Cheering stands vanished, that's how it seemed, fell into Venus's dreams. Sloth creeps down the serpentine road home. Talking, walking, my Helen of Troy. Yet still my heart knows it is alone. Save face for her, a heart's too coy. Tossing, turning throughout the night, oh, the silent truth makes me fright. Yet I crave her smile so fair, the bright sheen off her hazel hair. I scour the sage men of history. Maybe the weaver's speech he said were true. Trust heart or mind to keep loving her. Now I sit alone, unsure what to do. Finally clear? Her toxic grip not gone. The clenching of my marionette strong. I know it'll hurt, but I go, though wrong. As a spider, she weaves me her web. Sirens call me, running towards the ebb. Oh, please. I know that I'm being used. More of a game, pure triviality. I know that we weren't meant to be. I try to run, but the chains of my heart, stronger than Hephaestus's iron hand, an addict with tracks danced along a thin arm. I say no words. Stoic must a man be. Thank you.
Declan Coles, ladies and gentlemen. So it was a fantastic contest. I just want to let you guys know, and first of all, everyone, thank you for coming. Let's give a warm round of applause for all the students that came out, read their original poetry, all the winners, the shortlisted winners. As part of being a winner, we've also invited them to come participate with us at the New York City Poetry Festival. That's going to be July 27th and 28th this year. I don't know if you've ever made it out to Governor's Island, but it's a real rare treat to see some amazing poetry, see some amazing people. So we want to welcome you guys out. Come perform for us at the New York Browning Society. It's going to be a hit. People love it. It's going to be a lot of fun. Once again, just check the website, nybrowning.org, and also the website at the New York poetryfestival.com to find out the exact specific times and dates when it's released next month. I just want to let you also know that I had someone help me. Before, it was myself and Stephen Motika that were the judges. Stephen Motika had to move on, but we brought in this year, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm round of applause to our Vice President, Robert Kramer. He did a fantastic job in whittling, and he's an Xavier High School alumni, so didn't do you any favors. But we want to really thank all the kids, and seriously, it's been an absolute joy to be able to be a part of this, and we look forward to many years ahead and to continuing to make poetry a viable part of any curriculum here in the 5 boroughs. We have a fantastic a speaker coming up next, our featured guest for today. Timothy Donnelly What's funny is that typically people like to give me a bio or something to say, well, Timothy Donnelly was born in a cloud. You know, all I have is that he was born in Providence, Rhode Island, which is a beautiful place. He earned his BA from Johns Hopkins University, his MFA poetry from Columbia University, and now serves as an associate professor at Columbia University. I've read one of his poems about Mountain Dew. It's fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a fantastic presentation, 34 observations on Child Role, and let's give a warm round of applause to Timothy Donnelly, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, James. Congratulations to all the high school students. That was amazing hearing you read. I truly enjoyed that. And thank you, James. I'm going to just read a brief piece, and then I'm going to read the poem that I wrote the piece about. It's about the Browning poem, Child Roll Into the Dark Tower Came. And I'll just begin. 79 days ago, which is to say on February 25th, James wrote to me via Facebook Messenger asking if I would be interested in providing a 20-minute talk as part of the luncheon honoring the 2019 winners of New York Browning Society's annual high school poetry competition. And here we are. It was a nice message. James told me that the event would take place on May 15th, a little over a week after the birthday of Robert Browning, who would have turned, I think it's 207 last Tuesday. I think he was born in 1812. The word luncheon caught my eye, as it always does, and so did the mention of high school poets, because almost as much as I love lunch, I love to see younger people writing poetry and knowing that through poetry they are being encouraged to hope, to strive, and to achieve. I wrote these notes with these high school students in mind. There's really nothing I have to offer any Browning scholar or all the way adult reader. I'm here for the chicken and the kids, and also because when something comes my way from out of the blue, a screwball voice inside me always says, go for it. See where it takes you, take the ride, do the thing. I have 2 daughters at home, and they both write poetry in school. One of them 13 and very dire in her temper and driven to express her deepest feelings. The other compelled to construct elaborate rhymes and surprising images and outlandish turns of phrase. In my experience as a teacher, younger people often come to poetry either primarily as a means of expression or of construction, and the best of us figure out how to do both simultaneously. Certainly the poem I am here to discuss does both. Today is, in fact, my younger daughter's birthday. She's turning 10. She's the builder poet, a Taurus like Robert Browning was, and I assure you that what she wants me to be doing right now isn't talking about Robert Browning, but building her a strawberry shortcake, which before long I will have to leave here to do. You don't want to disappoint a Taurus, especially when they know what they want, which is effectively all the time. Tauruses are very determined and quite full of conviction and focus, and let's call it realness, and they like the solid food of life, and this makes them pretty interesting, but only one at a time. As a Gemini, I tend to like change and digression and possibility and even silliness, and Tauruses are quick to tell me when they've had enough. I think it might be this radical earthiness of the Taurus that the later Victorian poet Gerard Manley Hopkins, another of my earliest poetry heroes, was responding to when he wrote in a letter that Browning had a way of expressing himself, quote, with the air and spirit of a man bouncing up from a table with a mouth full of bread and cheese and saying that he meant to stand no blasted nonsense. And that's pretty much what I have waiting for me back at home. I might also note that I was excited to see that this event would be held at the National Arts Club, as I worked here for 5 years back in the mid to late 90s at the Poetry Society of America. After all the 5 New York apartments I've lived in and now Dodge Hall up at Columbia University, where I've worked since 2005, this is the building in New York in which I have spent most of my life. That's 7th in rank. And here I am again clocking in another couple of hours, or actually maybe a few hours. I'm not sure how common a practice this is, figuring out which buildings in this city you've spent most of your life, but I seem to do it often. One thing, I've got a list of the top 20. One thing I do know is that while I love to think of high schoolers writing poetry today, I myself did not write poems in high school. I only began writing them in college, and then because I was more or less coerced into it. I don't know that I would have dared to do so otherwise, although there was always something rumbling in the back of my head. As an undergrad, I wanted to study film, and where I went to school at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, the film studies program was part of the writing seminars, and in order to qualify for upper-level film classes, you had to take all the prerequisites, which included a beginning-level fiction and poetry workshop. Turns out I was a builder, first and foremost, and I threw myself into the poesis in a way that surprised my instructor, and she encouraged me to pursue it. And I did pursue it, up to and including the present moment. I took another poetry workshop, and then another and another with my first great mentor, Peter Sachs, and then one with the gigantic tattooed poet Tom Dish, dead now 10 years, who announced to the class at the end of the semester that it was traditional, somewhere probably in England, for an instructor to present his or her best performing student with a book at the end of the last class, and with a great kind of gruff flourish, before I knew what was happening, he handed me an inscribed copy of Robert Browning's The Ring and the Book. I was mortified and proud to be singled out. I'll never forget the moment, although it looks like I've lost track of the book. And when I tried to read it at age 20, I couldn't get into it. I tried reading some of Browning's famous dramatic monologues as a way to work up to it, and in my youth, wherein I wanted everything to sound so suave, I kept feeling in Browning that voice full of bread and cheese. I hadn't found my way in yet. But then, in the year 2000, Harold Bloom published his book called How to Read and Why. I had met him once at Richard Howard's apartment, and he was something else. And in this loudmouth book, he featured the anonymous early 17th century ballad Tom o' Bedlam, which I had never read before and immediately fell in love with. Everyone should go home and read this poem while I'm making strawberry shortcake. And How to Read and Why also included Robert Browning's Childe Roland to the Dark Tower Came. I decided to give it a try. And to be honest, I've been somewhat obsessed with it ever since. It's a darkly twisted, deeply disturbed and disturbing poem, delighting in its despair, totally over the top, but lacking much of the little ticks of staginess that would sometimes make Browning's longer monologues hard for me to get fully absorbed into. It's written in beautifully constructed iambic pentameter sestets, each rhyming A, B, B, A, A, B. Some of them, like the first, fourth, fifth, and sixth stanzas, comprising entire sentences unto themselves, which gives the poem a sort of breathless but completely composed sense of exasperation. I was in love. Observation the first. I find it interesting that I encountered Childe Roland to the Dark Tower Came and the anonymous poem Tom o' Bedlam at the same time, because as most of you know, the title of Browning's poem is spoken by the character of Edgar in Shakespeare's King Lear, who is concealing his identity by pretending to be Tom o' Bedlam, a sort of stereotypical mad beggar-type character. This, of course, imbues the poem from the very onset with a sense of instability and unreliability. Two, this sense is immediately underscored in the first stanza by the poem's protagonist, whom we come to identify quickly as the untested knight, which is to say the child of the poem's title. Roland evinces a vivid paranoia, believing the old man he finds stationed at a crossroads is put there to lie to him, snickering at him with a skull-like laugh, and attempting to lead him astray and into harm by sending him towards the Dark Tower, which is where the speaker presumes he sends all who encounter him. The speaker, however, is on a mission to locate the tower. Why, we never know. But he wants the danger or is compelled to pursue it in the weirdest way. He says he acquiesces to the old man, even though the Dark Tower was presumably his destination in the first place. This is the first clue that something is amiss with Roland deep down. Rather than confidently marching towards what he wants and knows to lie in a certain direction, he instead presents himself as surrendering to the will of a creepy ne'er-do-well who in fact sends him towards the same thing. It's as if rather than walking down the stairs toward your goal, you stood at the top of them waiting for someone to push you down them instead. Moreover, Roland relates that he dare not dream of actual success on his mission, specifically because his hope has so atrophied that he wouldn't be able to sustain it. What really satisfies him is the idea of imminent failure, which is the kind of ending he feels equipped to deal with, like a man on his sickbed who leans into death because he doesn't want to disappoint his friends who have already come to terms with his loss. We soon come to understand that the speaker has, quote, heard failure prophesied oft over the years, and that to fail, like all other knights who have come before him, would be to succeed to live up to what's expected and what's been forecast. It becomes fairly clear that the poem isn't just suffused with fatalism, but is, on some level, an exaggerated representation of the movement towards death itself, a translation of that journey into a kind of chivalric romance. What would existence look like if you experienced it like this, with every step a step towards death? For one thing, it would be pretty morbid, and apparently mostly nocturnal and menacing. This is observation number 7. The last glimmer of sun is described as a red leer. Interestingly, in light of the source of the title, we note that the author too has red leer. It should be noted that Browning wrote that the poem, quote, came upon him as a kind of dream. Moreover, he stated, quote, I had to write it then and there, and I finished it the same day, I believe. But it was simply that I had to do it. I did not know then what I meant beyond that, and I'm sure I don't know now. In this respect, the poem is apparently distinct among his compositions, which are said to have been meticulously and carefully composed. In the poem, everything that grows nightmarishly. Nature is starved and ignoble. The soil is lean. You might expect for flowers a little lowly spurge, a purgative, or cockle full of toxins to grow, but no, not even that. You will see a blind, stiff horse and think the devil himself doesn't breed it anymore and has put it out to pasture. If you're keeping track, this has been my 13th observation. The poem presents in this way a kind of bastardized or wrecked medieval tapestry as setting for its lonely, gutted journey. It's a wasteland where one might otherwise expect a filigree of flowering branches and harmoniously interknit vines. Moreover, Roland, whose resignation seems to have developed into a generalized belief that whatever is right, as Pope writes in his essay on man, quickly comes to hate that emaciated horse, who appears to be in agony because he thinks, quote, he must be wicked to deserve such pain. This is a place in the poem where we really see the toll breathing in all this fatality has come to take on the speaker. How if everything has to adhere to a logic and have some reason, then all this suffering can't be for nothing. It must have been earned. He writes, rather than it, meaning the horse, he must be wicked to deserve such pain, as if writing not about the animal, but about the human. It should be noted that the poem indulges in rampant Gothicism, which both suggests a state of overexcitation, but also, to some measure, seeks to produce the same in the reader as well. It is a state of hypersensitivity, of hypervigilance, such that where someone in another state might see, for example, simply a tree with a cleft in it, Roland here sees a palsied oak, a cleft in him like a distorted mouth that splits its rim, gaping at death, and dies while it recoils. Observation number 20. Note again that the tree, like the horse, is a him. Here is another clue that Roland is projecting his own psychology onto what he perceives. Roland conjures up memories of his cohort to help strengthen his spirit, but one after the other, the two knights he calls to mind and can, quote, almost feel and then even sees as frank as 10 years ago, both turn out to be traitors. Not exactly the encouragement he was looking for, but in the way that the poem repeatedly conflates success and defeat, his failure to land on chivalric exemplars brings him to prefer his joyless present to their shameful past. As with all the Gothic, it isn't inappropriate to feel a little macabre glee, a dizzying too muchness while reading the poem. In fact, that's much of its allure. as with, for example, Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven, which was first published to tremendous success in 1845, and about which Elizabeth Barrett, not yet Browning, wrote to its author, stating that your Raven has produced a sensation, a fit horror here in England. Some of my friends are taken by the fear of it, and some by the music. I hear of persons haunted by the nevermore, and one acquaintance of mine who has the misfortune of possessing a bust of Pallas never can bear to look at it in the twilight. Poe was apparently so proud of this letter, he showed it to anyone who visited his home. When the poem was published later that year in the collection The Raven and Other Poems, he dedicated the book to Elizabeth Barrett Barrett, as she was known at the time, calling her the fairest of her sex. Elizabeth told Robert that she considered the dedication a, quote, outrageous compliment and wondered if it proved that Poe was mad. She and Browning married in secret less than a year later and then fled to Italy, where they make that wine. Number 27, like the Raven, Childe Roland is a kind of phantasmagoria, a kind of journey through the mind through a succession of ghastly images and thoughts. As such, Roland, the untested knight, never himself engages in combat, but he does overhear a kind of scuffle somewhere, which he imagines to be made by toads in a poison tank or wildcats in a red-hot iron cage. Not only are they imprisoned, he thinks, but the prison itself is actively toxic or painful, and, quote, mad brewage sets to work their brains like galley slaves. Another moment that seems to reflect on the actual composition of the poem, Mad Brewage. In the poem, day might return to verify what you see, but it will only last a single stanza, like a flash, before all returns to night. I take it back. Roland does have one moment of combat, or something close to it, in what might be the poem's crescendo of grisliness. While crossing a river, always suggestive in medieval dream visions of the movement into the realm of the dead, Roland spears what he thinks must be a dead man's cheek, although supposes it might also have been a river rat, then doubles down on the grisly by adding, it sounded like a baby's shriek. This is the poem's most horrific moment, imaginatively skewering together corpse and rat, and then, worst of all, baby. What a bad kebab. This is my 29th observation. I call it a bad kebab in honor of my favorite phrase in the whole of the poem, which happens to appear in the poem's 29th stanza. That phrase is, namely, in a bad perhaps. A bad perhaps. This is sort of like the fearful version of the false surmise that Milton's speaker consoles himself with in his Lycidas. If some dreadful conjecture overtakes you, which is again what the poem overall feels like, you might say that it has come to you in a bad perhaps. Suddenly, Roland, beginning to give up on his quest to find the tower, realizes that he's there, again conflating success and victory, as to achieve death is always ineluctably comes at a loss, and not just any loss, but the loss of life. But what an adventure it's been. All life, death does end, wrote Hopkins, and Browning's poem allows us to experience the darkest implication of this truth, namely that the end, or the goal of life, is itself to die. But he does so by providing us with a certain measure of macabre pleasure, a kind of batshit theatrics in the face of the inevitable. Standing before the tower, he sees on the hills around him all the lost adventurers who came before him, a company of the dead into which he now gathers, quote, in a sheet of flame, which, sure, doesn't sound super comforting, but it gives Roland a newfound strength and a sense of camaraderie. He lifts an apocryphal instrument known as the slughorn to his lips and somehow manages to blow the words, Childe Roland to the Dark Tower came, at the very end of the poem, circling back to the title as if in a loop of eternal recurrence. What I like here especially is that he refers to himself as dauntless, which derives from the Old French verb dompter, related to the Latin domitare, meaning to conquer or to tame. So to be dauntless, like Roland is, in the end, is to be unvanquished, undefeated. And what I like about him is that he ultimately seems to burn through his fear in neurosis. So maybe that's why there's that sheet of flame. These fires are purgatorial fires, and they're being purified when they stand in them. Skitterish and over the top, he has nonetheless reached his destination. He's done the thing. He's done the inevitable, but done it his way. And ultimately, that is what keeps me coming back to the poem, that through its sick histrionics, it gets to where it needs to go. He does the thing. He looks the nightmare in the eye and plunges into it to the heft. To do the thing, he tells us, but to do it in your own way, and to let others take note. I'm now going to read the poem in the wash of all that I just said. Child Roland to the dark tower came. My first thought was he lied in every word, that hoary cripple, with malicious eye, askance to watch the working of his lie on mine, and mouth scarce able to afford suppression of the glee that pursed and scored its edge at one more victim gained thereby. What else should he be set for with his staff? What save to waylay with his lies and snare all travelers who might find him posted there and ask the road? I guessed what skull-like laugh would break, what crutched gin writ my epitaph for pastime in the dusty thoroughfare. If at his counsel I should turn aside into that ominous track which, all agree, hides the dark tower. Yet acquiescingly I did turn as he pointed, neither pride nor hope rekindling at the end descried, so much as gladness that some end might be. For what with my whole worldwide wandering, what with my search drawn out through years, my hope dwindled into a ghost not fit to cope with the obstreperous joy success would bring, I hardly tried now to rebuke the spring my heart made, finding failure in its scope. As when a sick man very near to death seems dead indeed and feels begin and end the tears and takes the farewell of each friend and hears one bid the other go, draw breath freelier outside, since all is o'er, he saith, and the blow fallen no grieving can amend. While some discuss if near the other graves be room enough for this, and when a day suits best for carrying the corpse away, with care about the banners, scarves, and staves, and still the man hears all, and only craves he may not shame such tender love, and stay. Thus I had so long suffered in this quest, heard failure prophesied so oft, been writ so many times among the band, to wit the knights who to the dark tower's search addressed their steps, that just to fail as they seemed best, and all the doubt was now, should I be fit? So, quiet as despair, I turned from him, that hateful cripple, out of his highway into the path he pointed. All the day had been a dreary one at best, and dim was settling to its close, yet shot one grim red leer to see the pain catch its astray. For mark, no sooner was I fairly found pledged to the plain after a pace or two, than pausing to throw backward a last view o'er the safe road, 'twas gone. Gray plain all round, nothing but plain to the horizon's bound. I might go on, naught else remained to do. So on I went. I think I never saw such starved, ignoble nature. Nothing throve, for flowers as well expect a cedar grove. But cockle, spurge, according to their law, might propagate their kind, with none to awe, you'd think. A bird had been a treasure trove. No. Penury, inertness, and grimace in the strange sort were the land's portion. See or shut your eyes, said nature peevishly. If nothing skills, I cannot help my case. 'Tis the last judgment's fire must cure this place, calcine its clods, and set my prisoners free. If there pushed any ragged thistle stalk above its mates, the head was chopped, the bents were jealous else. What made those holes and rents in the dock's harsh swarth leaves, bruised as to balk all hopes of greenness? 'Tis a brute must walk, pashing their life out with a brute's intents. As for the grass, it grew as scant as hair in leprosy. Thin, dry blades pricked the mud, which underneath looked kneaded up with blood. One stiff, blind horse, his every bone a stare, stood stupefied, however he came there, thrust out past service from the devil's stud. Alive? He might be dead for aught I know, with that red, gaunt, and colloped neck astrain, and shut eyes underneath the rusty mane. Seldom went such grotesqueness with such woe. I never saw a brute I hated so. He must be wicked to deserve such pain. I shut my eyes and turned them on my heart, as a man calls for wine before he fights. I asked one draught of earlier, happier sights, ere fitly I could hope to play my part. Think first, fight afterwards, the soldier's art. One taste of the old time sets all to rights. Not it. I fancied Cuthbert's reddening face beneath its garniture of curly gold, dear fellow, till I almost felt him fold an arm in mine to fix me to the place. That way he used, alas, one night's disgrace. Out went my heart's new fire and left it cold. Giles, then, the soul of honor, there he stands, frank as 10 years ago when knighted first. What honest man should dare, he said, he durst. Good, but the scene shifts. Faugh, what hangman hands pinned to his breast a parchment? His own bands read it. Poor traitor, spit upon and cursed. Better this present than a past like that. Back, therefore, to my darkening path again. No sound, no sight, as far as I could strain. Will the night send a howlet of a bat? I asked, when something on the dismal flat came to arrest my thoughts and change their train. A sudden little river crossed my path, as unexpected as a serpent comes. No sluggish tide congenial to the glooms. This, as it frothed by, might have been a bath for the fiend's glowing hoof, to see the wrath of its black eddy bespate with flakes and spumes. So petty, yet so spiteful. All along, low scrubby alders kneeled down over it. Drenched willows flung them headlong in a fit of mute despair, a suicidal throng, the river which had done them all the wrong. Whatever that was rolled by, deterred no whit. Which, while I forded, good saints, how I feared to set my foot upon a dead man's cheek, each step, or feel the spear I thrust to seek for hollows tangled in his hair or beard. It may have been a water rat I speared, but it sounded like a baby's shriek. Glad was I when I reached the other bank. Now for a better country, vain presage. Who were the stragglers? What war did they wage? Whose savage trample thus could pad the dank soil into a plash? Toads in a poisoned tank, or wildcats in a red-hot iron cage? The fight must have seemed in that fell cirque. The fight must have so steamed in that fell cirque. What penned them there with all the plain to choose? No footprint leading to that horrid muse, none out of it. Mad brewage set to work their brains, no doubt, like galley slaves the Turk pits for his pastime, Christians against Jews. One, and more than that, a furlong on. Why there? What bad use was that engine for? That wheel or brake, not wheel, that harrow fit to reel men's bodies out like silk, with all their air of Tophet's tool, on earth left unaware or brought to sharpen its rusty teeth of steel. Then came a bit of stubbed ground, once a wood, next a marsh it would seem, and now mere earth desperate and done with. So a fool finds mirth, makes the thing and then mars it, till his mood changes and off he goes, within a rude bog, clay, and rubble, sand and stark black dearth. Now blotches rankling, colored gay and grim, now patches where some leanness of the soils broke into moss or substances like thus. Then came some palsied oak, a cleft in him, like a distorted mouth that splits its rim, gaping at death, and dies while it recoils. And just as far as ever from the end, naught in the distance but the evening, naught to point my footstep further. At the thought, a great black bird, Apollyon's bosom friend, sailed past, nor beat his wide-winged dragon-penned that brushed my cap, perchance the guide I sought. For, looking up, aware I somehow grew, spite of the dusk, the plain had given place all round to mountains, with such name to grace mere ugly heights and heaps now stolen into view. How thus they had surprised me, solve it you. How to get from there was no clearer case, yet half I seemed to recognize some trick of mischief happened to me, God knows when, in a bad perhaps. Here ended, then, progress this way, when, in the very nick of giving up, one time more came a click, as when a trap shuts, you're inside the den. Burningly it came on me all at once. This was the place, these two hills on the right, couched like two bulls, locked horn in fight, while to the left a tall scalped mountain, dunce, dotard, a dozing in the very nonce, after a life spent training for the sight. What in the midst lay but the tower itself, the round squat turret, blind as the fool's heart, built of brown stone without a counterpart in the whole world. The tempest's mocking elf points to the shipman thus, the unseen shelf he strikes on, only when the timbers start. Not see, because of night perhaps? Why, day came back again for that. Before it left, the dying sunset kindled through a cleft. The hills, like giants at a hunting, lay, chin upon hand, to see the game at bay. Now stab and end the creature, to the heft, not here, when noise was everywhere. It tolled increasing like a bell. Names in my ears of all the lost adventurers, my peers, how such a one was strong, and such was bold, and such was fortunate, yet each of old lost, one moment knelled the woe of years. There they stood, ranged along the hillsides, met to view the last of me, a living frame for one more picture. In a sheet of flame I saw them, and I knew them all, and yet, dauntless the slughorn to my lips I set, and blue, Child Roland to the dark tower came.
Thanks, guys.